Well, good morning, Golden Corner Church.
Good morning.
Man, y'all look good this morning. You do. I'm so glad to have you all here. You guys online, I'm sure y'all look fine. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I am excited to be back in the saddle. I actually, to teach, I've had a few weeks off here from teaching. I thought about using that song, and then we realized it wasn't appropriate for Sunday morning. But I do want to thank you, man, and I want to thank you for everything that's been happening around the church over the last few weeks. Kids Week was awesome, a Lutheran mission team. I want to just, guys, there's a lot of people working to make all those things happen. I'd just like to give them a round of applause if you wouldn't mind. And God for showing up. He's been moving here at the church. I know he's been moving here on Sunday mornings. I thought Ronnie's messages the last several weeks have been timely and just so moving. And so I want to thank him, too, for that and his leadership. I've had plenty of time to meditate and think about what I want to teach on, though. So if it's all the same to you guys, I'd like to get started. Y'all cool with that? Sure. Good. Earlier this year, I shared a series with you called Everybody. Y'all remember it? We call those types of series in the church world visionary series. It was laying out the vision and strategy for Golden Corner Church really in broad strokes, okay? And so what I would love to do, and I'll give you a little breakdown of it. Remember we talked about churches alive, churches for everybody. Everybody has an important part. In order to discover our part, every single one of us has to be doing a few different things. Everybody gets together. Everybody serves somehow, everybody gives generously, and everybody brings somebody. Y'all remember that? So I would like to take a few weeks here to talk about the latter part of our vision. And I'm very excited about it, very excited about the opportunity to do that. But to do it, guess what I have to do? Man, y'all are getting good, We do this for another 20 years, we'll have this licked. The story of today is going to be in Luke chapter 12. It's verses 13 through 21. If you'd like to follow along, we're going to put a few of them up on the screen. I'm going to tell some of them. In Luke chapter 12, we're told that Jesus is teaching, and his crowd that is following has become a huge crowd of people, so much so that in the very beginning of Luke chapter 12, we are told that that as Jesus is traveling along, that some people are actually being trampled by the crowd, getting injured. The crowd is so big. So let's think about that for a second. Hopefully you've never been in a crowd like that where something like that happened. But imagine the crowd for just a second that is following Jesus. They're not enclosed in a little room somewhere. These people are traveling from village to village. Think about the number of eyes and the number of ears and everything that Jesus is doing. Everybody is there listening and hanging on every single word Jesus is teaching. And you might be wondering, said, Tim, what is he teaching about? Well, the first thing that Jesus is teaching about, according to Luke chapter 12, he taught on hypocrisy. Then the next thing Jesus taught about is he spent some time talking about how much each one of us was valued by God. Every single person is valued by God. And then the next thing Jesus talked about, I love this, he talks about the perfection of God's provision and his care. And so as Jesus is teaching here in Luke chapter 12, as we get to verse 13, this is what happens. Apparently, a voice rings out from the crowd and issues a question to Jesus, a request, if you will. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've heard these kind of stories before in the Bible. So you're thinking what I'm thinking, right? Voice rings out from the crowd. It says, Jesus, I've got a friend who is deathly ill. Could you heal them? Right? We've seen that before, right? Jesus, in a village nearby, there is a young girl who's dying. Jesus, I have a friend, and he is afflicted by demons. Could you intervene? I mean, these are all stories we've seen in the Bible, all things we've seen Jesus do. Do you think that's what this voice yelled out? No, because I wouldn't have made that whole thing up. I wouldn't have done all that. That's not what the voice said. Look, read with me in verse 13. Then someone called from the crowd, Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me. Y'all laughing at that? Listen, this guy, he's there, he's listening to Jesus, he's listening to Jesus teach all these things. He hears that part about the perfection of God's provision and care, and he's like, oh yeah, provision. Jesus, tell my brother that he is supposed to divide the inheritance with me. Now, you might need a little background in order to understand what all is going. This man has a concern, potentially even a grievance. He wants Jesus to join him on his side to pressure his brother into dividing their father's estate with him. Let me give you a little bit of background. According to the law in Deuteronomy, this is how this was broken up. When a father's estate was divided up, the oldest brother received a double portion of the inheritance, okay? And the younger sibling would receive a single portion. So for ease purposes, and I'm not very good at math, I went to Walhalla, so I'm just kidding. Just for ease purposes, this is what's happening. So if there's two brothers, then the older brother would get 2/3 of the inheritance, and the younger brother would receive 1/3 of the inheritance. When you do some historical research, what you discover is this process was glitchy. Can we say that? The process for dividing inheritance a lot of times was glitchy, and one of the reasons why I was the older sibling was most of the time had the most knowledge about what the inheritance was, had the most knowledge about the father's estate. So what would happen in a lot of cases is the older sibling would withhold and cheat a younger sibling out of part of their proportion, right? So although we don't know the specifics of this case, and I wouldn't go as far as to say it was an epidemic, but it wasn't unusual for this to happen, I believe it's safe to assume that this man is of the mind that his father's estate has not or will not be properly distributed. Everybody still with me? That it won't be properly distributed according to the law, according to the way it's supposed to be done. So he is asking Jesus, this is what he wants. Jesus, this is what I want. I want you to make sure that the law is upheld. I want you to make sure that this inheritance is divided according to the law. I want you to take what is wrong, Jesus, and I want you to make sure it's done right. You got it? Why Jesus? Why do you think he's asking Jesus? I had some thoughts on this. I was like, I wonder why he's bringing Jesus into this. And this was a thought. Perhaps he knows. I believe his brother's there, by the way, because it says, tell my brother. So I think his brother's like maybe 5 people down. You know, they're kind of mad at each other. But he says, hey, tell my brother, right? So I think his brother, maybe he already knew, man, my brother really respects Jesus. He really loves Jesus. So maybe if Jesus says it, he will do what he's supposed to do. Maybe, this is later on in Jesus' ministry. A lot of people were starting to call him the Messiah and think of him as the Messiah. Maybe this guy knew, hey, this is the Messiah right here. My brother thinks it's the Messiah. So if the Messiah would ring in on this inheritance issue, fixed. Right? Or perhaps he just needed someone who was well acquainted with the law, and Jesus just happened to be walking by, and so he shouted something out. I don't know, but nevertheless, he included Jesus in it. He made his request. But Jesus' response is different than you might expect. Read with me, verse 14. Jesus replied, friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that? Do you see it? Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that? For all intents and purposes, Jesus refuses to settle this dispute for them. He refuses to get in the middle of this, at least in the way the man was asking. Okay? Make sure you caught that footnote. At least in the way the man was asking. Jesus refused to engage in the argument. Jesus says, who made me a judge about issues like this? And actually, when you look up the word judge and you look up the Greek and the Hebrew word, it actually translates to arbiter. You know what that's defined as? Arbiter. Who made me the arbiter between you guys? It's the one with the authority to decide. Jesus is saying, who gave me the authority to decide this matter between you two of you? Jesus. Authority. Just make sure we all got that. All authority, all power, right? Jesus has all the authority and all the power. Jesus had the authority to look at a sick person and make them well. Jesus had the authority to look at a dead man and raise him from the grave. Correct? Jesus had the authority to look to the waves and the wind and say, silence. Yet in this case, he says, I don't want the authority to decide this between the two of you. Jesus immediately shifts the conversation, and I want you to look to what end. I love this verse. Look to what end, verse 15. Then he said, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. Who do you think he's talking to right here? Who's he addressing? He's addressing the man. The man says, settle this between me and my brother. And Jesus turns all of his attention and all of his focus, and he turns it towards the man himself. And he says, beware. Guard against every kind of greed. Because life is not measured by how much you own. Now, where does greed live? In your heart. Thank you. I want you to see here that Jesus addresses the man's heart. Jesus addresses him personally and cautions him, guard your heart, friend. Guard your heart against greed. Jesus is on a roll, and as often the case is when Jesus sees an opportunity to teach, what does he do? Teach. That's exactly right. Jesus sees the opportunity to teach, so that's exactly what he's going to do. So he speaks to the man's heart, and then he addresses the crowd, and he addresses the man and his brother. And he tells a parable. And this parable is called the parable of the rich farmer. You remember it? You ever heard it? Parable of the rich farmer. A lot of times when we read this, this is kind of the part of the story we focus on. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of this. You ready? There was a farmer who was incredibly successful, kind of like Casey Gray. All right, and this farmer, he's having so much success, he's storing up so much wealth that he decides, he's like, well, what I got to do is I need to build bigger barns, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to store up as much of this as possible, and I'm going to kick back and just enjoy everything that I've put up in these barns, and I'm just going to enjoy life. So he focuses all of his energy and all of his attention on being a successful farmer and storing up as much wealth as he can, and he kicks back and he is enjoying all this wealth, and all of a sudden God shows up to him one day and says, you're crazy, bro. Cliff Notes version. He says, you're crazy, bro. What are you doing? You have spent all of your time and all of your energy saving up all of this wealth, and your focus has been in the wrong place. I want you to read this verse with me that he says. This is the last place. A person is a fool. Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth and not have a rich relationship with God. Jesus urges this man that had called him out, he urges his brother and the crowd to focus all of their attention on having a rich relationship with God. You got it? That was the point, right? The point was to get all of these people focused. Don't worry about this materialism. Don't worry about all these other things. Turn all of your attention on having a rich relationship with God. So here's the thing. What do we learn from this story? I think there are some incredible lessons in here about materialism, about focusing our energy on having a rich relationship with God. I believe that there are lessons about that. But to be honest with you, the lesson that stuck out to me and what I feel like we need to talk about as a church, I saw in how Jesus engaged this man. How Jesus engaged this man and engaged this crowd. I believe the lesson is there for us. And it's a lesson actually that is something that I believe I saw about Jesus that I think is important for us. Are you ready? Say you're ready. It's important to Jesus to stay on mission. Did you hear me? Y'all still with me? Yes. It's important to Jesus to stay on mission. Jesus recognized something. Heeding this request, the request of this man, it'll derail my mission. Taking part in this debate will distract everyone here that's listening, including myself, from my mission. Engaging in this argument will only hurt my mission. I believe that's what Jesus saw. My papers are stuck together. When I read this story, over the last week or two, it dawned on me how important it was to Jesus that he stay on mission. And I believe there are multiple reasons that Jesus chose not to engage in this discussion, not to engage in this situation, at least the way the man asked. But I want to clarify. It's not that Jesus didn't know what was right. Do you hear me? It's not that Jesus didn't know what was right. Jesus 100% knew what was right. He knew what the law said. He could read it frontwards and backwards. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure he was there when it was written. Jesus knew the law and he knew what was right. Not only that, I guarantee you that Jesus knew the specifics of the case. How many times in the Bible do we see that Jesus knew everything that was going on? Not only knew it, he was God in the flesh, but he knew people's thoughts. He shared intimate details of their life. Jesus knew it all. I'm sure he knew exactly how much was in the Father's estate. I'm sure he knew exactly how much each brother should get. And I would bet money that Jesus already knew whether any injustices or cheating was taking place. You agree with that? He was the perfect person for the job. Had all the authority and all the knowledge, yet he refused. Jesus chose not to insert himself into the argument the way he was asked, whether there was injustice or not, and I believe that was a conscious effort to stay on mission. So you're probably wondering, well, Tim, what was Jesus' mission? How would you describe it? Jesus' mission was to speak to the heart of every single person that came in front of him. And to point them towards a relationship with God. Y'all still with me, church? Jesus' mission was to speak to the hearts of all those who came in front of him and point them towards God the Father. And Jesus used his voice and his love as a means to correct what people were believing about God and to show them a different way to live. But Jesus had come to earth to bridge a gap between our sinful hearts and God. Do you understand that? Every single one of us. His mission was to get people to the Father. His mission was to get people to the Father. And unfortunately, the people of Jesus' time kept expecting Jesus to do all sorts of other things. And this is a prime example of it. People were expecting Jesus to do all sorts of other things just like this man wanted. There was a belief system in the Jewish community that the Messiah was coming to address what was happening in their world, right? That he was coming to address what was happening politically, what was happening socially, what was happening economically. Because of the Roman occupation. And we've talked about that already this year. There was a belief system that he was coming to deal with all those problems. There was also a belief that the Messiah was going to come and that the Messiah was going to address all of the bad things that were happening. Anything that was bad, he was going to address it. That he was going to address all of the bad people. He was going to get rid of them, and he was going to get all the good people and do something good with them. That was the belief. Roman occupation and even religious corruption at the time had led to mass injustices, mass inequities, oppression, and division across the nation of Israel. And many believed that Jesus was coming to fix that broken world and that broken system. They thought that's what the Messiah was going to do. And I'm going to say something, I want you to hear me. Jesus didn't come to fix a broken world. He came to fix people's relationship with God. Did you hear what I just said? Jesus didn't come to fix a broken system or a broken world. He came to fix people's relationship with God. And he refused to misrepresent why he came in this instance, right here. When we read the Gospels, we discover that Jesus' journey of conversations with one person after the next was pointed at what? At the heart. One conversation after the next was pointed at the heart. He dealt with people personally and effectively. And when this man shouted, "Hey, Jesus, tell my brother you're on my side and he should divide his inheritance with me," Jesus immediately speaks to the heart of the man. Guard your heart, brother. Beware of the greed that can build up and take root in it. Jesus urged him to shift his focus from the inheritance or the injustice that he was feeling and shift it towards his own heart. Do you see how Jesus responding differently could have affected his mission? Can we mess around for a minute and just go with me in your minds and think about this? Jesus responding differently, I want you to think about how it would have affected the mission. What if Jesus had said, "Yeah, man, you're right. Your brother is a scoundrel. I know that. And he's got $5,000 tucked away in an account that he ain't told you about. And you're due that, man. You deserve that. That was your daddy too." What if Jesus would have done that? If Jesus had engaged in that argument, that division, and that request, a few things would have happened. Number one, the brothers' relationship, it would have been worse off than before he started. You see that? Trust, compassion, any chance of restoring that relationship back to the way it should be, I think it would be kaput. Second thing, if Jesus would have shifted all his focus to this argument, this injustice, if he would have shifted and focused it all on that, I'm going to tell you what would have happened. Everybody would have been so focused on that and so focused on that problem. And they would have been dividing up the inheritance and making sure that all the paperwork's done and everything's fixed exactly like it's supposed to be. If they would have done that, I promise, nobody would have ever paused and said, "Hey, maybe we should shift our focus to our relationship with God." So their relationship with each other's worse, their relationship with God, unthought of. I want to tell you the third thing that would have happened, and you said it. The crowd would have went wild. They would have. The crowd would have went wild. They would have said, "Oh, Jesus, great. You're here to fix stuff. We love that. Jesus, there is a Roman tax collector who has been just taking more and more from me every week, and I know he's cheating me. Jesus, could you smite him or something? Jesus, there is a corrupt mayor over here, an evil mayor. Could you do something about him? Could you get rid of him, make him disappear, do something? Jesus, my wife will not make me a sandwich. And ain't she supposed to submit to me? Isn't that right? Shouldn't she submit to me?" Sorry, guys. Jesus, little Johnny won't listen to a doggone word I say. Not one word I say. And isn't there something in the law about honoring your father and your mother? Jesus would have had to address every single disagreement and worldly problem one at a time, making one ruling after another, debating and making a stand at every turn for what is right. Instead, Jesus wanted to stay on mission, and his mission was to address the heart he had in front of him. He wanted to address the heart that he had in front of him. The one that he could reach. The one that he could talk to. You know what? Me and Ronnie were talking about this week, and we thought about this story. You remember the paralytic man? The four friends bring the paralytic man to Jesus. They bring him to Jesus, and they get him through the roof, and they lay him at Jesus' feet. And this man is paralyzed, and his friends have brought him. They brought him because he is paralyzed, and they're hoping to get their friend healed. And Jesus looks down at him, and do you know the first thing that Jesus said to him? Your sins are forgiven. Now, when I tell this story, I always imagine this, when I believe there was a transaction of hearts that happened. Maybe words that were unwritten or unsaid, but there's something that happened as these two men look at each other. There's a faith that is transferred. And Jesus looks at him and says, your sins are forgiven. The first thing Jesus did was he dealt with his heart. And then he addressed his problem. Because Jesus knew something. What good would it be for me to fix the man's legs and have him walk straight into hell? Jesus understood something that we often miss. I believe we miss it. As a church, I believe we miss it. As the church. Jesus understood that his mission was enough. His mission was enough. Jesus understood that what he was doing was enough. That if he would speak to the heart of the people that he had in front of him, and he would love on them, and he would be honest, and he would speak to that heart, he knew that was enough, because this is what Jesus understood. If I can get them to turn all their focus to him, and I can get them thinking about him, interested in having a relationship with him, I want to tell you something. That inheritance issue, it won't be an issue. It won't be. Because the older brother, he'd be so in love with God, he'll be walking so closely with God, he'll be so generous, he'll just be giving all of his inheritance away to his siblings. And those younger siblings, they'll be so in love with God and so content and so at peace, they won't even care that they're getting the money. Jesus' mission was enough, and he knew that. It was enough then, and it is enough now. So what do we do with this lesson? Well, if it was important to Jesus that he stay on mission, I think it's equally important that we stay on mission. That's what we should do. We should stay on mission. If we're ever just sitting around talking, and we end up sitting around and we start talking about dogs, there is a guaranteed chance that I'm going to bring up Jackie. Guaranteed. Jackie was my, in college dog that lived with me, slept with me. We drank out of the same cup. I mean, this was my best friend. And Jackie was I bought Jackie when she was a few months old as a hog dog, and she was a hunting dog. And so she was a hunting dog for most of the first half of her life at least, and then I kind of turned her into a pet. So if we ever get into a talk about dogs, I'm going to bring up Jackie, and I'm going to bring up how good Jackie was. And you're going to say, oh man, I had a great dog too. She wasn't nothing compared to Jackie, I promise you. I win. But I mean, Jackie was an incredible hog dog, and there's no doubt that if I start talking about Jackie, I'm going to tell you about the miles we hunted together, the rattlesnake bites, the hogs that we killed, the cliff that we had to go down to get her on, riding in horseback and find her laying next to a creek because she's hunted herself out. She can't even get up off the ground anymore. That's what I'm going to talk to you about Jackie. What I'm not going to talk to you about is the first 3 years of Jackie's life as a hunting dog. Because when I bought Jackie, Jackie had a problem. And this is just the way that they say it in the hunting world with hunting dogs, but Jackie was trashy. Do you know what that means? That's what they call it. It's the way we refer to the dogs. Jackie was trashy. You know what that means? That Jackie didn't really care anything about a hog. Jackie liked anything that would run from her. If it looked like something that she could chase, she was like, I'm a chaser. That's what I do, so I chase it. And so I was all excited with this brand new hunting dog. When I had her old enough to start hunting, took her out in the woods, and Jackie strikes. Ha, 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 ha. That's how Jackie barks. She had no bark. Mountain curs are silent most of the time. And so that was what she would do. And man, I'm like, oh, Jackie's on something. Jackie's on something. Whoa, here comes a deer. And there goes Jackie. Ha, 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 ha. Right behind it. And you're like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And it was like that for a couple of years, no joke. Every time now Jackie would chase a hog if somebody else got on a hog, but Jackie was looking up at squirrels, she was chasing birds, she was doing everything in the world because she's like, I'm a hunter, this is what I'm doing, Daddy, I'm hunting, One day we lost her on the tracking collar, couldn't find her, was just getting like a weak signal, got over there, and Jackie is waist deep in a rabbit hole digging. I'm like, but you're not a rabid dog. You're supposed to be a hog dog. Me and my buddy had actually went in havers on her, my buddy Randy. So we made it our endeavor to get this dog on hogs. And so we started learning how to get her focused on wild hogs. And we did all the training things and disciplinary things and all these things you have to do, put her on a lot of hogs real close. And all of a sudden, we call it another thing, tighten those screws. And Jackie's a hog dog. That's all she cares about. That's all she wants to do. And so for the next several years, man, that was where all them other stories happened, where we caught all them hogs and had all this fun. Jackie loved it. She loved chasing hogs, and that was her thing, and that's how she defined herself, even to the point that when she was 10 years old and she got hit by that car, that's exactly what she was doing. She chased a group of wild hogs across the road and got hit by a car. And she was retired. She wasn't even supposed to be doing that. She just got on some hogs that was living behind the house on the coffee road. I always took great solace, though, in the fact that even though I lost my friend, I always took some solace in the fact that she died on mission. That she died doing what she was put on this earth to do. And that's my prayer for our church. That's my prayer for Golden Corner Church. That's my prayer for me. I want us to be a church that is in love with our mission and recognizes the fact that our mission is enough and pursues it to the best of our ability all the time. I hope and pray that whenever life is coming to a close or Jesus is coming back or whatever happens, I hope Jesus finds Golden Corner Church on its mission. I hope we haven't become distracted. We haven't become derailed. I hope regardless of what's happening out there in the world and all of the arguments and all the debates and all of the stands that we could take, I hope that we haven't got distracted from our mission and the people in front of us. I'm talking about right in front of us. That's what I hope. So I hope you got this question in your mind. All right, Tim, we got it. That sounds awesome. What's the mission again? That's a great question. And I'll tell you about it next week. Let me pray for you. Father, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for this church. I'm thankful for everything that you do. To be honest, I'm thankful for this word. I'm thankful for the way that you teach us and the way that you grow us. And this is my prayer for our church. Since I've been at Golden Corner Church, since I started here as a young kid, the mission of Golden Corner Church has been so clear. Unfortunately, we live in a world where I believe the mission can become muddied. We can lose sight of exactly what it is we're supposed to be doing, and we can get focused on other things. Father, this is my prayer. My prayer is that we will become fixated on your mission, that it will become ingrained and built into us, and we will begin making a difference in the lives of the people to our left and to our right, the people that we live next to, the people that we go to work with. And every single person that we have around us, we'll recognize them as the mission. But God, I don't want to get ahead of myself, and you know I will because it's who I am. Help us to recognize when we're getting off mission. Help us to recognize when the words that we say and the things that we do are actually taking away from what you want us to do. Father, and we'll give you all the glory for it. It's in Jesus' name, and everybody says, amen. Speak